I'm sure that our next guest, JP Morgan's Paula Humphrey, will add value by exploring what is meant by building a personal brand. Paula, welcome to Women into Employment. Take it away.
Thanks very much, Johnny. This topic is something that's very close to my heart. I spent 10 years as a careers advisor working with career changers and sort of MBA level, master's level students. And I think there's such a mystique around personal brand, and let's not be shy about it. It can feel like a bit of an icky subject. It's all a bit personal brand, my personal marketing, anyone who talks about themselves in the third person, that sort of thing. It doesn't feel right. But if done genuinely and sensitively, I think it's a really powerful tool just to remind yourself what you've got to offer, how to articulate it, and how to really get someone else to understand your value as well. And that's where I want to take the session today. So, Johnny, I'm not sure if you're driving the slides or I am, but if we could go to the next one, I'll get us cracking. And I think if you can click one more, there should be a picture that comes up. Right. So here's our friend Jeff, probably biggest winner of the pandemic, and then he launched something into space. Whatever you think about that, Jeff really sums up what, for me, personal brand is all about. Your personal brand is what people say about you when you're not in the room. And that sounds a bit sinister, like people talking about you behind your back. But it's absolutely not that. If you think about the key moments in a career, you're not really present for those. So an interview wash up when decisions are being made, decisions about projects that are going to be allocated, promotion, all of that sort of thing happens when you're not there to advocate for yourself. So you need to do as much as you possibly can to make sure that the people in that room talking about you know who you are, have a consistent experience of who you are, and have evidence and examples of what you can do. So whilst you're not there, as much as you can control the narrative. And the only way that you can control that to a certain extent, because obviously we can't control it completely, is to make sure that people have a really clear vision of who you are and what you do. So all I would say is when you're thinking about personal brand, think about that conversation that could be happening with somebody who's got an opportunity that could be perfect for you. What do you want them to be saying about you to other people? And then how can you influence that? So let's go to the next slide. Again, personal branding, I think, gets a bad rep because it feels quite disingenuous if done wrongly. But actually, there's a lot of things it can help you with. Differentiation is the first one. And I think it doesn't matter who we are, the background we come from. At any point in your career, you are not going to be the only person probably up for that job, up for that promotion, trying to make that change. And whilst we are all unique, there are always going to be factors that we have in common with other people. And how do we stand out in the mind of the person who's looking at us, looking at that decision? So a strong personal brand really leans into that differentiation. What makes me different and unique, and do people know that? Or am I another service leaver who's got all these great skills, but how do I differentiate from the other service leaver who's got all that great skills? That differentiation then builds into you being front of mind. Because if you think about, if I said to you, male actor, people are going to come to mind, and they're probably people that have differentiated for a reason. So it could be, if I think male actor, I'd probably go for Ryan Reynolds because he differentiates himself by being someone who I think is quite nice. But there'll be other people who differentiate themselves for other reasons. But in that large swathe, they've made a difference, they've made an impact, and that's why they come to mind. There's also another part about the front of mind, which is if you've successfully articulated the skill set and the value you bring, when somebody says, oh, presentation, Paula, that means that I've successfully articulated my brand, which is I enjoy giving presentations, and you can rely upon me to fill an hour. So differentiation really leads into that front of mind. And it's that idea of, and this is me showing my age from knowing what a Rolodex is, but that mental Rolodex of you should be the first one that they think of. there's something else that a strong personal brand can do for your career. And it's what I call the checker trade factor. So you can tell everybody that you're brilliant and that you're great and you have these skills. But if somebody else says, actually, yeah, I've seen it, I've worked with them, I've seen evidence of that, it just gives you that extra level of credibility. And that's where making sure that those people who advocate for you don't just know what you say about yourself, but have really strong evidence of what you can do. So it's that difference between somebody telling you they're good and somebody else going, actually know what they really are because I've seen them in action, or experiencing it firsthand. So as I said, I enjoy giving presentations. I like to think I'm good at it. My credibility will be whether you experience that as well and you can say, yeah, actually she was quite good. So those are the three things that your personal brand can really make a difference for. Obviously, there's lots of other things as well, but that's how you can stand out with your personal brand. I'm whipping through quite quickly. Obviously, if there are questions that come up, I'll try to answer them at the end, but do put them in the chat because I can also try and answer them as we go through with another session. So next slide. All right, so it's good. You know what is there. But something I would really say, and sorry, I've just got distracted because I've realised I've made a boo-boo on my slide. This should be all about, so this slide is all about what's your personal brand. So ignore the left-hand side for the minute. Starting with your personal brand, don't start with here's a job description or here's where I want to go. Think about where you are right now. And don't think about here's all the things I can do, because as women, and I know not everybody on this call is a woman, but the majority of us are, as women, we will tend to go to what we can't do when we're looking to create any sort of change. I want you to think about what you can do. And think about it in terms more of sort of values and the way that you do things. So what do you stand for? What's important to you? So I stand for making sure that everyone can come to work and be happy and get where they want to go. And I also stand for being, I like to be quite informal the way I work, because I want to create relationships with people. So think about what are those things that make you you, that is more about how you approach your work. Then think about what you want to be known for, and this is probably where the skill sets and deliverables come in. I want to be known for giving powerful presentations, for having absolutely first-class data, for creating really robust, implementable ideas. I want to be known for being reliable, for being creative. So think about those things that you want to be known for, because they're usually the ones that you enjoy and are important to you, and they're also probably the ones that you're really good at, and that's what you want people to know. And something that I always encourage people to do is think about someone that you would like to be like. Now, this is not to say we shouldn't all be our unique, wonderful selves, but often it's quite good to have somebody in view that you admire or you like the way they do something, because it helps you understand how you might navigate building and promoting that brand. So there's a couple of people who stand out for me. One is Karen Brady. So she was Sir Alan Sugar's right-hand lady, or Lord Sugar as he is now, right-hand woman on The Apprentice. She was also the first female chair of a Premiership football club. What I really like about Karen Brady is she didn't go down that route of I have to be more men than the men. She is unapologetically female and feminine. She wears her hair long, she wears dresses. She adopts and leans into those feminine skills around reading people. And I really like that, because she's moved away from the standard, this is what it's like in a man's world. She hasn't tried to adapt to that. She's unapologetically said, no, I'm a female and I'm always going to be a female, and that's okay. The other person that I really align with is Claire Balding. So I was lucky enough to hear Claire Balding speak a couple of years ago at JP Morgan, and she was talking about the Olympics and the coverage of the Olympics, and she wanted to cover the athletics because that was the blue ribbon event, that's what everyone tuned in for, and she was given swimming. And she was like, I was really annoyed, but I thought, you know what, this is what I've got, So I'm going to make everybody care about swimming. And she said it was a bit of a gift because it was the year that the young South African swimmer broke the world record, and his father had come over. And his father was huge handlebar moustache, very charismatic. And she really leaned into that personal story. And I don't know about you, but I remember watching him talking about his beautiful boy. And what she did was she took the situation that she was in and she really put her own stamp on it and made it work for her and made it a point in her career that she could pivot around. So for me, that idea of being unapologetically you, and I am a very feminine female. That's just how I am. And I haven't ever felt the need to sort of get rid of any of those sort of female traits, but also to create passion around what you do. That's really important to me. So they're good role models for me when I look at how I want to project my brand. This might sound a bit fluffy. I promise you it's not. And the reason it's not fluffy is because when I look at who I've hired since I've been in my time at JP Morgan, I also sit with the recruitment team here. So I hear the conversations. 9 times out of 10, the technical skills to do the job are very much secondary to the approach and the values. We can teach you to do pretty much anything. What we can't teach you to do is want to do it, or do it in a way that really resonates with our culture, or do it in a way that makes you feel comfortable and is going to make you want to turn up to work. But in your values, what you want to be known for, you will also give away what those skills are because they will inform all of that. So if this is feeling fluffy, don't dwell on that. Get those skill sets into what you want to be known for. But the other part of this is if you can forge a career that really resonates with your brand, you're always going to be happy. You're not going to be in a situation where like, this just doesn't feel right. I'm doing stuff that I'm not comfortable with. So don't be afraid to start. You may have to compromise down the road to get the role, but there should never be a complete detachment between who you are and what you stand for and what you're doing day to day. We spend too much time at work for it not to feel good. Okay, so that's all about you. But your brand is nothing unless somebody starts consuming it. So if we flip to the next slide, this is where the left-hand side I got swapped over, apologies. This is the next bit you need to do. So I've got my brand here, I know what I want. I know who I am and what I've got. I need to understand what my consumer is looking for. So first of all, think about what do they need? What do they need from you to get the job done? And you might have a job description. That job description will give you an idea of what they need. It's not the definitive. Again, research shows that women will apply for a job where they meet 90% of the criteria. Men will apply for a job where they meet 60% of the criteria. So we've got to give ourselves a break, but also think about, read between the lines. What do they actually need? So if they're saying somebody who's got 12 years experience of project management and making events work, what they really mean is I need somebody who's really organized and who can see the bigger picture and gets things through. Something called enterprise thinking, which again, and sorry, this sounds like I'm being very broad brush, but there is research behind all these comments. Women are shown to be really good at enterprise thinking. Give you a really basic view of that. My husband and I go to the gym together in the morning. I get up 10 minutes before him. I make us both a coffee. I make sure that our water bottles are in the little bag by the door. I make sure that the laundry is in, ready for him to press the button when he gets home, because he works from home and I go into the office. His lunch is all there in the fridge, ready for him to go, with the saucepan on the... We're getting that my husband's not a functioning adult. He absolutely is, but he doesn't think of these things. I also know what we're having for dinner that night and whether I need to do an Asda order. That's enterprise thinking. It's not the when do we need to get out the door. It's what are all the other things that make the day run. And women are good at that. And particularly mums, where you're sort of looking after a large bunch of people. So read between the lines. And if they need organization, that's what you can give. How can you add extra value? So again, when I was moving into the last job that I did with JP Morgan, which was in campus recruiting, One of the values that I brought to that was beyond what was on the job description is I'd also worked as a careers advisor. So I've been on the other side advising students how to prepare for interviews, how to approach companies. And now I was on the flip side, knowing, well, these are the kind of questions, concerns that students used to come to me with. How can I address them as an employer to make that process more simple? I'd also worked in a tech firm and was coming in to look after tech in JP Morgan. So there is value add there that I could bring in what the competition was doing. So again, those sort of peripherals can really make a difference because it's that extra bit that you can bring. The other thing that I'd really try and find out from the person who's consuming your brand is what are their values. That could be as much like you could have someone said, look, I really want my team to work together, but I've got a bunch of individual contributors who are just kind of getting their stuff done. I think we could work better creatively. You might say, well, actually, in my experience in service, I've been bringing together teams around the same objective and getting them to work together as a team. So that's a value I can bring. Doesn't matter that I don't have experience in payments operations. That's the value I can bring. And that's how I'm going to align with you. It's also a really important one to know, are you going to be happy in that job? Do your values align with what your managers might be? But again, it's building that trust, building that resonance of this is somebody I can advocate for on their behalf because I understand the values. I'm going to go to the next slide, if that's okay. And I realise there's a lot of stuff I'm dropping here. Here's where I would like to get a little bit scientific. So you can look at those pieces and go, okay, right, I know all of this, I can work it out. But you already have a brand. We all already have a brand, whether we know it or not, whether we like it or not. And it's really worth, if you're at a sort of career choice point or a period of change, to see if you can uncover what your current brand is, because the more you know about it, the more you can work on it and the more it can work for you. And this is where I like to use this. This is the Jahari Window. It was developed in the 1980s by two occupational psychologists called Joe and Harry, hence Jahari. Not the most creative, but it works. And it was originally designed to get teams to get to know each other, but it works really, really well for looking at your personal brand. So in that top corner, the known to others and the known to you, that's what's out there. That's what you see and I see when I look in that box that's got my name on it. That's my current brand. So it's what everyone knows about you. Underneath that is what I know about myself, but you are yet to experience. The top right, now you've just learned something about me. I don't know my right from my left. The top right is what you know about me or what you perceive about me that I'm not aware of. And then the bottom right, we just tend to ignore because that's stuff that we just don't know. And that is what Donald Rumsfeld used to call the unknown unknowns. Until it happens, we're never going to know. And the slightly strange analogy I always use is, if there's a zombie apocalypse, do I suddenly discover that I'm an absolute dead shot at shooting zombies in the head? We're never going to know that. It's not even worth worrying about. Where it's really interesting to do some digging and do some work are in the facade and the blind spot. The facade, I always say, is kind of your opportunity to delight people, for them to discover something new and great about you that they never knew before, and that will come up and they'll be like, wow, I didn't know you could do that. So it's that real chance to elevate. The way you move things that are in the facade, things that are into brand, is not just by telling people, but find opportunities to demonstrate it. Because as I said right at the beginning, the more people see and live your brand, the more real it is for them, and it's easier for them to talk about it, rather than just saying, well, Paula told me that she could, what have I done recently? So I deadlifted at the gym last week, and I deadlifted 80 kilograms. And I could tell you I've done that. You're like, that's great. Paula says she can lift 80 kilograms. But if you were in the gym and saw me do it, then you'd be like, wow, Paula can lift 80 kilograms. So it's really looking at where can I demonstrate that, and dip into your facade to find out those things that you want people to know about you. So it's that opportunity to delight and enhance. The blind spot is more tricky, but I would say even more important, because it's the things about you that you don't know, and that's where the risk is. Now, on one hand, that risk could be that there's stuff that you're really good at that you're not talking to people about. when I was given the job that I'm in now, one of the things my boss said to me is, I think you've got real executive presence. And weirdly, throughout the entire recruitment process, I was saying to my husband, I'm really worried about fronting off to managing directors and senior people because I don't think I've got the gravitas, because I'm quite informal and quite, I like to be me. And for somebody to say, no, you actually have got that, and everyone in my team to say it to me, that's been brilliant, because that's given me a lot more confidence around my brand. But there are also going to be negatives in there, things that may be holding you back. So again, my old team, my campus recruiting team, all considerably younger than me, and they saw me as a bit of a mum. And in a way that was nice, but equally I didn't want to be their mummy. I needed them to see me as a leader, somebody they could go to and talk about their questions, but not somebody who's going to solve all their problems. So that was a really interesting one for me. I've also been given a lot of feedback about emotional leakage, which is not great. Every thought I have is expressed on my face, and sometimes that's not great. So finding out things like that and being able to consciously work on them has really enhanced my brand. The only way to find out about what's in your blind spot and do something about it is to ask for feedback, something that I think none of us really, really like doing, but is so important. And a couple of ways to do that. One of the things is if you think there's something that you want to change and you want to know about it, go to a couple of people that you know and say, I'm trying to focus on this. So on a scale of 1 to 10, where am I at the moment? And they'll say, well, in terms of emotional leakage, I'd say you're about a 5. Okay, what could I do to get to a 7? And they can say, well, you could try not sending that email the minute you write it, leave it for 10 minutes, come back. Okay, great, I'll try that, thank you. Then you go back to them after a period of time, say a month, 6 weeks, and say, I've really been working on what we talked about. Just from what you've observed, where would you put me now? A couple of great things about that. It's really easy for someone to give you a score. It takes away some of that personal piece around, I don't want to tell them that they're rubbish at this. But it also allows them to give you the structure around it, gives you something to go and work on. And just that action of going back to someone and saying, I listened and I'm working on it, that's an expression of your brand, somebody who is willing to take feedback and does something about it and closes that loop. So I would really encourage, as you're starting out on this, as you're building your brand, do this as an exercise first. Find out what people think about you. Does it align with what you want and also what you think your audience needs? And then you can start building around. Now, I know I'm at time, and I know that because Johnny's just appeared on the screen. So I am going to stop talking at this point, and leave it over to you. And I know there are a couple of question stuff in the chat, and I'm happy to sort of stay on and do a bit of typing if that would help.
Thank you. That would be helpful. Paula, that was absolutely amazing. That's added a huge amount of personal value for me, and I'm sure for everyone on this call. And we're enormously grateful for the support of JP Morgan as well. So building on Paula's presentation of kind of the why and the what, let's look at some of the how you do this. And we're now joined by Jackie Lerm, head of social media at BFBS. Jackie is a digital and communications industry leader tasked with leading and delivering on BFBS's brand's social media strategy. Her role includes creating award-winning social media and training packages and developing skills for over 200 employees. Jackie, we are so pleased to have you here today. Please do begin.
So thank you so very much for having me again, Johnny. Next slide, please. So as you all know, I'm a head of social media at BFBS. I look after a team of 5 social media managers, incredible digital content creators who are hugely talented. Next slide, please. We also collectively, the team, look after an audience of 1 million people across Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, YouTube, which we're incredibly proud of. Slide. We also, as Johnny mentioned, have the 2 social media training courses. So one is specifically for military spouses. It's an 11-week online social media marketing course, and it takes you from knowing absolutely nothing about social media to being able to plan a campaign and create content and run ads. And of course, the digital culture program is exactly the same, except it's open for everyone. Slide. As a woman, I think it's good to start with the very, very important staying safe online. Just as we do, just as it's been covered in recent news reports and some of the news articles that have come out, I think it's incredibly important we keep this in mind. Slide. First thing to remember is you need to be careful with what you share. There's a lot of information being shared online, articles, news articles. Some of the official guidance coming from Defence at the moment is that you more and particularly need to look at things like misinformation, disinformation. There's a difference between the two. So misinformation is where people would take information out of context and use it to kind of make their own point or give or try and make their argument known. Disinformation is what content which are intentionally false and designed to deceive, which makes it harder for us to determine what's true. And I think sharing either one of those pieces of information on your channels, if you are using LinkedIn to network and find employment, you need to be very careful and just vet the information. Twitter has this really handy tool where it'll pop up. If you want to retweet an article, it'll ask you, have you read it before you share it? Slide. Secondly, be careful how much you share. So we'll go on to the next slide. We'll look at Facebook. I think a very good starting point for you is to kind of go into your social media profiles, start with searching your name, see if anything comes up, any articles you might have shared in the past. Usually if you use Twitter, your tweets will pop up. I go into your Facebook account, go in your profile settings, and then check to see what type of information is being shared publicly. Next slide. And you can do the same with Instagram. They've got really useful feature where if you've got, you might find that you're getting an increased amount of unwanted attention in terms of comments or trolling. They've got a really useful feature that kind of automatically limits those. Fingers crossed no one has had to come across that recently. And Twitter, exactly. They've also got a really useful feature on Twitter. So I'm a keen advocate because of the amount of time that I spend on social media. It's really important. The stuff that I see in my news feeds are content that makes me feel good and makes me smile. So I follow a lot of meme accounts. I see a lot of dog videos, which I'm sure my dog will be making an appearance during this call. And you can go on to Twitter and mute words. So my boss has got things mute like COVID or Brexit or any type of topic that you don't want to see in your newsfeed. You can mute those. And it's just to be careful with the amount of information that you share on Twitter as well. If you don't want the tweets to be public, you can go in and protect your tweets. But it is a open networking platform, Twitter, and I think it's used more increasingly more in a professional sense these days. Next slide. And LinkedIn, some of you, if you don't have a LinkedIn account yet, one thing to remember is that LinkedIn has this feature where if you view someone's profile, unless you've changed your privacy settings, they'll get a notification to say, Jackie has looked at your profile. And if that's not something that you want people to know, then definitely go into the privacy settings just to update that. Next slide. Another very important tip. So when you set up all your profiles, especially with the situation in Ukraine, it's very important to enable multi-factor authentication on all of your profiles. We have personally seen an increase in attempts to gain access to our accounts. And you can imagine, as a brand, myself with my LinkedIn account got hacked and information was shared. It would have a big impact on my employer as well as myself. So if you're not sure how to set up multi-factor authentication, a quick Google search for things like set up MFA for Facebook or Twitter or Instagram or LinkedIn, and there's a lot of guides online that you can use to do that. Next slide. The last thing to give a go, and I think you'll all be very surprised. If you go to the website haveibeenpawned.com and you put in your email address, it'll show whether any of your information's been leaked previously. So say for instance, as an example, we've used Canva, the online design, graphic design software, and they had a major hack a few years ago. And it noticed that my email address and login details have been leaked on Have I Been Pawned? And the one thing you need to remember that if you use the same password across all of your social media channels to log in, and just one of those accounts or one of those servers are hacked, then you stand a risk of losing access to all of your accounts. Next slide. And now for the enough of me scaring you. It's not all scary, I promise. I just thought it would be really important to look at the security side of things. Slide, we'll go through what it looks like to set up, or what a really good LinkedIn profile looks like. And I thought who better to use as an example as my social media manager, Adam Powley, who is absolutely legendary. When you set up your profile, it's really important that you start, it's got a workflow process. So you just follow the process to complete the information, add as much information as possible. It's always important to have a clear cover picture. That's the big photo you see at the top where Adam stood talking. If you have something that's relevant to what you do or what your interests are or the type of content that you share, absolutely fine to include that there. A really nice up close and personal head and shoulders profile picture, which is clearly lit and well exposed. Try and stay away from any group photos because it's sometimes hard for people to make out who exactly you are in the photo. And then where it says Adam Powley, you can add pronunciation. So my name, I haven't enabled the pronunciation for my surname on there yet, but I think it's something that's I probably need to do, especially because I've got quite a unique last name. The second line is really important. And when you complete your profile, you need to remember and you need to try and think like a search engine. So you need to try and think what people type in when they're looking for new candidates or if they're looking to hire. So if I was looking for someone who is really good at managing social media, I would type in managing social media because I know that people would have that sentence in their profile. So try and come up with a little line that accurately describes who you are and what you do in a few short words. You can add the type of content that you regularly share, talk about in the form of hashtags. Next slide. And the about section is really important. So here you really need to sell yourself. It's important to talk, don't talk about yourself in the third person. So I'm a professional multimedia content creator. I have a passion for training and development. So if anyone were to look for a social media manager who's really good at training, with a background in teaching or studying for their PGCE, ads would appear right at the top of the search results. So always think like a search engine. Next slide. Thank you. The next section on your profile is the experience section. And this is where you will add all the information of all the previous roles that you've had. It's important to include a couple of words or sentences under each of the roles, which explains what it is that you did in the role. LinkedIn has got this really good feature where you can embed digital content into this section to kind of illustrate the type of work that you've been working on, which is really good. Slide. Include all your education sections. This will also help you connect with any other students or people looking for someone with a specific qualification, so keep that in mind. Next slide. Volunteering work is another great example and something that you need to include in your profile. It just demonstrates exactly that it kind of gives people a sense of who you are behind the professional curtain. Skills. So this is a really good section. So you can go in and you can say, so I'm really good at, and type in a list of the skills. And then what happens is you could ask people to endorse your profile. So as here, as an example, I've gone in and I've endorsed him for graphic design because he's an absolutely amazing graphics designer, obviously social media, radio production. I've endorsed him with the skill through LinkedIn because he was one of our previous radio presenters. It can be difficult to get the endorsements on your profile from other people, purely because it's not something that people would think to do. But you can, when you're networking or any one of your previous colleagues, you can send them a message on LinkedIn and just ask them to encourage them to add some endorsements for you. It's something that we do regularly with our social media students as well. Slide. Which also brings me to the next section, which is recommendations. And this is a really powerful section on your profile, and a surefire way to get a lot of recommendations is to write recommendations for other people. So if you've worked very closely with someone, to go and write them a little recommendation about the project that you worked on, what type of person they were, how you enjoyed working with them, and then ask them to return the favor. Everyone loves a recommendation. Next slide. And then there's also the section on the courses. So these would be things like if you've done data protection or first aid or child protection, this is you can include those here. Next slide. And then you've got projects. So if you ran a massive campaign in order to raise money for something, if you hosted a woman into employment and organized the whole event, that's something you can include on your LinkedIn profile. Next slide. Honours and awards. It's another really good section. I'm particularly proud of this section because our social media training programs won 2 awards, so we include those on our profiles too. Slide. Languages. So if someone is looking for someone who's bilingual, so my profile says Afrikaans and English because I'm South African. Causes, you can say, you can select the items that are very important to you. And interests is something you need to keep in mind. So if you start following pages, as an example from someone like Donald Trump or really political or controversial figures or LinkedIn influencers, then it's just to keep in mind that it is public and the people that you connect with will be able to see that. Next slide. And just following up and touching on what Paula has mentioned is to build your brand, you need to get yourself out there. Slide. And you do this by so we'll start with the don'ts. When you join LinkedIn and when you've got your LinkedIn profile, it's really important that you don't start sending random connection requests to everyone you think that just to get your number up. It's important to include a little note, make sure that the person that you are connecting with, you're connecting with for a reason. Maybe you've just had a meeting with them. Do not get into arguments on LinkedIn because everyone that follows you will be able to see, as an example, Jackie commented on this post and they'd be able to read your comment. It's a professional networking platform, so it's best to stay. Debates are absolutely fine. Healthy debates are absolutely fine, but arguments is a whole different story. And do not ask too much from a stranger. Do not connect with someone, and once they've accepted your connection request, to immediately ask them for something in return. It's really bad etiquette. The amount of connection requests that I get from people with no connection to me whatsoever, that'll say things like, "Hi Jackie, I just saw your profile, great to be in touch. Oh, by the way, we've got a lot of really good video producers, could we make a video for you?" So don't head straight into the sales pitch when you're using LinkedIn. Slide. I've got a couple of examples here for you. Now there's a Twitter account called State of LinkedIn, which features a bunch of people and how they use LinkedIn. And this is very important that you don't use it this way. So nobody likes the humble brag. There was someone that posted something the other day where they were talking about their job and day to day, but there was a photo of it accompanying of them holding it was the car steering wheel to show that it was a Range Rover and there was a Rolex on the arm. Don't humble brag when you're using LinkedIn. Slide. And also don't make it all about you. So this post is all these posts are actual posts from people. This is what someone thought their followers or connections would be interested in seeing. I really do not care about someone getting up at 5 to go to David Lloyd by 6. I don't think anything in that bit of passage or a paragraph that they've added there is something that would interest me, if I'm honest. So it's important to not make it all about you. Slide. And please don't post chainmail and pass it off as your own. As you can see, there's a tendency to copy and paste chainmail because you get a lot of engagement, and people might find that it's a really good way to boost your ranking in news feeds, but best to steer clear of chainmail altogether. Slide. And remember, don't be a LinkedIn influencers. So there's this running joke that LinkedIn influencers try to tell a story out of every single action they take during the day. No one likes a LinkedIn influencer. Next slide. So now that I've told you what not to do, here's what it's important that you do. Include a note when you send a request a request to connect with someone, remember to include a little note, explain who you are, why you're connecting, and always keep in mind that first impressions can be formed on LinkedIn too. It's really important that you also engage with other people's content. And this helps for a number of reasons. For one, it's networking, it's digital networking, it's how you build relationships. And for two, it brings me back to the other section where it's not all just about yourself. If you don't engage right on people's content, comment on people's posts, have those discussions with them, that's another way to build your brand. And it's really important that you post regularly. You can post updates, you can use videos, you can use photos, you can write LinkedIn articles. So for instance, I could write an article about the top 5 tips on creating really good social media content. Anything that is your subject or your area of expertise, you can give back to the people that you're connected with and give them free advice. Next slide. It's important to celebrate other successes. So you'll see a lot of these posts where people will announce that they start in a new position, and you can comment on there. It's really important that you comment and engage. It just creates a really nice community feel. Slide. As mentioned earlier, give advice, hints, and tips freely. So Jo Emerson is someone that I've worked with very closely over the last couple of years. And she's a self-confidence coach, and she posts these regular videos on her Facebook page, on her LinkedIn, and on her Instagram. And they're just really short, bite-sized tips on what you can do to boost your confidence. And she's doing that free of charge. Slide. And it's important to remember that people follow people, not brands. So if you are on LinkedIn, you need to stay human and write your copy as if you're talking to someone, and try and steer clear of any sort of jargon. Next slide. Very quickly before Johnny cuts me off, inappropriate messages. Next slide. These are actual examples of inappropriate messages that women received on social media. And as a woman using social media, it's something to keep in mind. The best course of action for any sort of inappropriate messages is just to report the account and block. There's no point in getting into any back and forth in the messaging. And as always, if you guys need anything, if there's you have any questions or need any sort of advice or support, please do get in touch with me.